afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the forum. 43 years ago today, my first son was born, and a couple of years later, my second son was born. His name was Ryan, and he's a friend of Ryan Nord. They're more than good friends. They're good buddies. And Ryan goes back to the days of coaching baseball and soccer and all of these things, but I wanted to have Ryan come and talk to you because not only is he very bright, very creative, and a very good attorney, he's quite accomplished. And he started out in real estate development in Texas, and he maintains an active law practice in Utah. He graduated from the University of Texas with a Juris Doctorate in law, and he's going to tell you about that profession, what he likes, and why he enjoys being an attorney. And I can tell you that he is very, very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the time over to Ryan Nord.
Oh, no, really, it's too much. It's too much. All right. Well, thanks for having me here today. I appreciate the invitation to come and talk to you. I want to answer questions that y'all have. So feel free, as I'm talking, raise your hand. There's no, we're not on a death march. We're not on a structured presentation today. I want to answer the questions that you guys have. So as I talk about being an attorney and kind of my version of being an entrepreneur as an attorney. I want you guys to ask me questions. I want to, come and ask me questions after as well if you don't feel comfortable in the group setting. But I want to tell you a little bit about how I got into the law, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, what the options are for those of you who are considering a profession in law, how you might get there, some tips to get you there along the way. I remember, gosh, you directly age me, right? 40 years old, almost. I'll be 40 in March, right? Everybody can do that math from your sons. But I remember like it was yesterday sitting here in Slick and then the University of Utah doing some classes and trying to decide what I wanted to do in my life. I grew up here, went in Salt Lake. I went to Collinwood High School, and I really wanted to be an estate planner. That really fascinated me. How do people manage their money? How do they make it grow? How do they preserve it and protect it? I went to the University of Utah. Like I said, I did some stats classes, some other classes here at the Slick. Went to the University of Utah. I graduated as a finance major. And so my whole plan was I'm going to go be an estate planner. I'm going to help wealthy people manage their money, and that's going to be really fascinating. We're going to figure out taxes, and we're going to figure out trusts, and we're going to figure out ways to protect it, make it grow, pass it down to generations, keep people from fighting over it after somebody passes away, all that good stuff that estate planners do. So I applied to a number of different law schools, and I'm going to talk to you guys at some point in this presentation about applying to law school. What you do and don't want to do, maybe some good things I did and some mistakes I made along the way. And for those of you who are considering it, hopefully give you some practical advice about what to do and not do from my own experience, so mostly mistakes. And so I applied to law schools, and like a lot of people do, I got out the U.S. News and World Report and started scanning the rankings, right? Anybody do that? Anybody been guilty of scanning the rankings, right? Thought, man, University of Texas, that's a good one. I got to apply to that one, and I got to apply to, all the others. I contributed some money to Stanford, which was, they said, thanks for your $70. And, that's probably about all they did is cash my check and threw my application in the garbage. I did a few of those, but you have to go for it, right? And so I applied for it, and looking back, it's kind of interesting how I made that decision, both to go to law school and to go to the school I chose. I had this illusion about what being an attorney would be and kind of what I thought it'd be. And as I made that decision, I partially relied on my father, who suggested that law was a good profession. Looking back, I'd make that decision very differently now as I did then. I really didn't do a lot of research into it. I just thought, hey, attorneys, they seem to be relatively successful. It seems like an interesting profession. They seem to make decent money, right? Which is always something that you think about when you're deciding what you want to do as a career. And so I thought, well, I'll be an attorney. Why not? I probably should have done a little more analysis and looking into it, tried to maybe get a little more practical experience before deciding that's really what I wanted to do. Fortunately, I love what I do, so I kind of lucked into it. I just maybe lucked into it the wrong way, but it's all is well that ends well. So I applied to a lot of different schools. University of Texas was one of the options. I heard Texas, and Austin in particular, is a wonderful place to live. Heard great things about the students' experiences who went there and said, why not? I'll go to University of Texas. Sounds great, Stanford didn't take me, so, I'll go there. They're at least in the rankings, and I kind of made the decision that way. I didn't really think about where I wanted to live, didn't really think too much about costs. Went to University of Texas, and again, fortunately, just kind of lucked into a great situation. Loved everything about University of Texas. So on my way, in your first year of law school, they give you a set curriculum. Everybody has to learn about contracts and constitutional law and criminal law and rules of court and all these things, and it was fascinating. I absolutely loved law school. It was engaging. It was the most exciting academic experience I ever had. You're sitting in a classroom, you're talking about these famous court decisions that you've heard of, and you're debating them. You're talking about things like free speech and, constitutional rights. You're talking about tort cases and, what constitutes a tort. I remember one that sticks out to me in my first year is we spent a class debating over whether or not somebody who took a puff on a cigarette and blew the smoke into the radio announcer's face, was that a tort? Did they actually commit battery? Did they actually touch that person? He didn't touch him, he didn't hit him, he blew smoke into his face. just debating these interesting topics. I just found it so intellectual stimulating. I just loved it. Stressful at the same time, because the school is unlike anything else you've ever done. It's a whole different format. Everything comes down to your one final, and it's a completely different way of kind of analyzing and going about school. So I found it exciting and challenging and terrifying all at the same time. But in the middle of my first year, my wife and I had I say we got pregnant. She says she got pregnant, but I say we got pregnant, right? And I needed to find a job. And so I started applying, and jobs are a little limited, especially during the school year. I was a little nervous because, here I am going to be a young father. I'm in the first year of law school. You're not supposed to have a job, so I had to kind of do it a little bit on the slide, but I got a job with a firm that does litigation. So you have a few different types of law. Let me just break those down real quick, and then I'll go on talking about that. There's a million different types of law. In my mind, I kind of break them down to a few different, relatively simple categories. You have civil law, which is what I do. People suing each other, litigation. You have criminal law, right? Obviously, people committed a crime. Someone's trying to prosecute them. Somebody's trying to defend them. You have intellectual property law, and I kind of break that out separate because it's got its own set of different requirements. It's a different type of practice. Patents, trademarks, and within that you have people who draft them and then people who fight over them. And then bankruptcy work, which is its own different animal. And then finally, what I call government work, which can have a really broad scope. So again, I was planning on and then you have obviously estate planning, which is what I was planning on doing. And I kind of call that a transactional practice. Helping people set up deals, structure entities, draft contracts, structure deals. And so I wasn't planning on being a litigation attorney, but I needed a job. I had to pay for my wife and my baby now. She was a school teacher, and she was going to need to stay home with the baby. So I started working and immediately fell in love with it. I just loved everything about it. It was competitive. It wasn't overly adversarial, which I thought it would be. I thought you'd always be just butting heads and nasty to people, which is why I didn't want to go into litigation. Found it to be relatively professional, cordial, and just, it was the chess match, right? Here you are. Here's what I love about it. Imagine you're going to make a presentation to a judge or a jury, and you're going to talk to them about something that they've never heard about before, and in all likelihood don't have any practical experience about. My specialty is construction law, so I deal with a lot of contractors. So typically I'm talking to somebody about aspects of construction, and the judge or the jury, they know nothing about, at least on a technical level, about what we're about to talk with them about. And I'm trying to convince them that my side's right, and the other side's trying to convince them that their side's right. And you get real life people up there, and you're trying to get testimony from them, and it's just this chess match. It's so fun, it's so exciting, it's so engaging. I really love it. A lot of attorneys don't like what they do, but again, following my pattern, I kind of lucked into what I do, and I love everything about it. When I was at the University of Texas, I took a class from a construction litigator, one of the top litigators in Texas in construction law. Just this brilliant guy, and he was giving back to the community by teaching, sharing with all us younger people his experiences and his expertise, and we hit it off. So I went and did a summer internship or clerkship at his firm, and thought, gosh, not only do I love litigation, but I love construction litigation. It touches on some of the things I've done before with real estate, and so I started doing real estate litigation and never really looked back since. So I worked there for about 5 years. I moved back here to Utah. I took a job with the firm. Really enjoyed it. Again, just doing construction law. And many of you, this is an entrepreneurial class, right? So, the decision that, sometimes you have to make in life is, do I want to keep working for somebody or do I want to strike out on my own? In a private practice, the way it typically works is you put in your time as an associate attorney, so you get hired, you get a salary, your benefits, you put in your time, you work your way through the ranks, 6 to 10 years, you are eligible to become a partner, at which point you get compensated as a pseudo owner. I decided I wanted to accelerate that a little bit, start my own firm, and kind of branch out, kind of like some of you are considering doing, by what you're learning in this class. And so I'll talk about that process a little bit later, but I went and started my own firm and built it up, and it's been really wonderful. So let me tell you, just to give you an idea, because sometimes I say, I do construction law, and people look at me like, well, what does that mean? And I do a lot of different types of construction law. Let me tell you a couple stories about just cases I've handled, or just a couple examples. One from around here that you might be familiar with. Of course, I'm old, so this might be a little bit before some of your time, but anybody remember Legacy Round 1? They're constructing Legacy Highway, gets shut down by all the environmentalists. You remember that? And so you have this big, massive highway construction project, hundreds of millions of dollars. You got all these subcontractors that are lined up to do this work for this massive general contractor that's hired on. For example, you have a company. Have you guys ever driven down the freeway and you look up and you see the bridges, and they've got those concrete beams that are running across that support the bridges or the overpasses? So those were all done, at least in this Legacy Round 1, they were done by a company that had this really large contract to do all that concrete work. And it was too much concrete to try and import from all the different contract plants around, so they built their own concrete plant out by the site. Huge expense, millions and millions of dollars specifically for this project. Humming along, everything's great. They're cranking out girders for the bridges. From one day to the next, in federal court, the environmentalists shut down Legacy Highway. All of a sudden, we got a problem, right? Because we got a general contractor that needs to get paid, and he's stopped the brakes from one day to the next, literally, because the court order. And then you got tens and tens of subs who've spent massive amounts of money to get people there. They've not taken on other projects. This particular concrete girder company, they built a plant, incurred huge expenses they were hoping to recover over the course of the project. Wasn't anybody's fault that it got shut down. Wasn't UDOT's fault. They were fighting it. Wasn't the general contractor's fault. They were fighting it. So what do? Everybody fights over who should pay whom, right? And so that's what we did. I represented the general contractor and UDOT, basically. UDOT was behind the scenes, and we went and we worked out resolutions with all these subcontractors. It was a really interesting situation because it wasn't a typical construction project gone bad. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was just environmentalists won. They were protecting everything environmentally out there, and it got shut down from one day to the next. Another example of a case, I was working on a case, and it had a foundation. And it's what's called a slab on grade foundation. So what that means, here in Utah, we're used to typically having basements. This was in Texas, and this was in an area of the country where you couldn't have a basement. Had clay soils, and clay soils have a kind of a unique characteristic. They swell, right? So they swell.
I worked construction in St. George.
There you go. They swell, right? So when you get water in it, they
expand, and you can get settling and rising and all sorts of issues.
Right. So what they do in Texas to address that is they sometimes will put the slab directly on the dirt with the idea that if it's going to move, it's all going to move together. Imagine a boat on the water. Hopefully not that bad, right? But it's all going to move together, okay? And that's a good solution to deal with soy or clay soils, at least in that area of the country. Problem is, you've got all your plumbing and everything that runs underneath that slab. So if you have a plumbing problem, then you got to figure out how to fix it. Well, what they do is they tunnel underneath the slab, and then they'll work on the plumbing, needs to be worked on, and then you have a problem because then you have a void underneath the slab that's got to be filled. So I represented the engineer that was hired to supervise, filling in this void. So what they do is they pump a lightweight concrete back into that void, and they fill it basically that way. So the contractor and the engineer are out here at the pump machine, and they're just pumping the concrete in, right? Like, wow, this is sure taking a lot of concrete. This is amazing. I never thought it'd take this much. No one was home at the time. What they didn't realize is that they were pumping. Somebody forgot to go poke some holes, in the foundation. So you got air building up, right? It's like, it's like a pump. It's just basically creating pressure, because this concrete's coming into this void, air pressure is just getting compressed. At one point, foundation just goes pop, right? So then instead of going into the void, you got concrete going into the house. So, I laugh, it wasn't my house, but, so they literally filled up the bottom level of that house with about 5 inches of concrete. Obviously it's a problem, right? There's not much to fight, right? It's not the homeowner's part. But then you got the, got the general contractor say, oh, hey, designer, you're supposed to, engineer, you're supposed to, oversee the pumping. Hey, you were the one who figured out how much material to get, should have known a problem, and you're doing this, right? We fought over that. Other typical scenarios, you'll get, building projects where you get cost overruns. You get into really interesting issues with delays. Delays are really fascinating because it's always a whodunit. Think about a construction project. You've got all these people who have to do work in a certain amount of order, right? You have to have somebody excavate the foundation before somebody pours the foundation. Once somebody's poured the foundation, you got to frame it. Once somebody's framed it, you better get a roof on pretty quick, dry it in. Once that's done, you go do your drywall, your paint, finish, etc., right? Imagine along the way somebody runs into a hiccup. Let's say the excavator, and everybody's lined up, and they've got this project, but they got 8 other projects going on. So it's not like they can just, hey, call me, I'll show up there the next day. They got to fit in this project with all the other projects they're trying to manage on their schedule. So you get an excavator who is excavating and they hit some rock. Ah, shoot, okay, I thought I was just gonna be getting really nice, easy soil. It's gonna be in and out in a day or two. Now I gotta blast rock, I gotta drill rock, I gotta do something along those lines. That puts me back a few days, or maybe puts me back a few weeks. All of a sudden, that put me back a few weeks, so now this guy who was gonna come pour the foundation on Thursday can't come till 2 weeks from Thursday, but that caused him a problem on those other 3 projects he was planning on doing during that time. So then he's off. And then by the time he gets it done, then you got a framer, but he's off because, he had his best framer guy go off on vacation to the Bahamas for a week. And it's just a domino effect. At the end of the day, you get a project that's maybe built 3 months late. Whose fault was it? So we argue over those types of things. I get a lot of delay claims. So it's a really fascinating and interesting line of work. I'll tell you one other one that's I thought was interesting. And that's on the judgment collection side. So you go and you have a dispute over it, whatever the case may be. This one happened to be a real estate developer. He's kind of a shady guy. And he owed my client a pretty good sum of money. We went to trial. We won a multi-million-dollar judgment against him, pretty significant. The way you try and collect on a judgment, there's a lot of ways, but one of the ways is you bring them in and you have them answer questions under oath about all their assets. Tell me about all your business activities, give me all your documents, give me all your tax returns, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of a cat and mouse, right? Because they're not trying to give you information about all their money and assets and you're trying to get it. This guy came in, swore up and down he didn't have anything, he was broke, et cetera, et cetera. And this is kind of just a karma case. It's really a law case, a karma case. So 2 weeks after my asset exam with him under oath saying he doesn't have anything, my client's down at Lake Powell, and there's a teenage gal at the dock, and she's got a jet ski, and she's got a couple of gas cans, and she's there at the fuel station, trying to fill up the gas cans. And it's kind of hard to balance a couple of gas cans, especially full gas cans. Many of you guys go down to Lake Powell or been down there. Anyway, you get in what's called the channel. You got this lake that's really big, got a really big channel, and then all these fingers off of it. Well, you get lots of boats going through the channel. So what that does is just all those wakes start creating a bunch of waves, right? So it gets really choppy, especially on a jet ski. It's kind of hard to drive through with a jet ski, much less with a tank full of gas. My client sees this teenage gal with this tank of gas, asks her what's going on. She says, my family boat ran out of gas, so I'm taking some gas back to the family boat. He said, well, That's going to be really hard to do going through the channel, just with all the wakes, all the waves. Throw it in my boat, I'll follow you. So throws it in the boat. He follows her. They come around, to one of the fingers of Lake Powell, pull up to a 37-foot Sea Ray. Right, we're talking, big, expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars boat. And out walks developer. And he said, and they see each other. He says, I guess I owe you a call. And he said, yeah, you better give me a call. So anyway, so it's just kind of interesting. It's always something interesting, something I really like about the practice of law. One of the things I thought that's been really interesting for me in the practice of law is I thought, like this kind of slime ball, I call him a slime ball, real estate developer, I thought there'd always be somebody who was generally right and someone who was generally wrong. And one thing that's been really interesting to me, because I think sometimes attorneys get a bad rap, right? They'll, hey, you've got two people arguing two different sides. Somebody's got to be lying. Somebody's got to be representing the guy or the gal who's lying or not telling the truth. And it's been a really interesting life lesson on perspective. Let me give you guys an example, and I'll relate it to the law. But you guys ever been watching a show? I'm trying to think of a good show. I'm going to name all these old shows, like Point Break or something like that. But you ever been watching a show where somebody's maybe trying to pull off a bank heist? And you're seeing it from their perspective, and you're rooting for the bank robber, right?
Robin Hood.
Yeah. Well, Robin Hood had some good motives and all that. But you see somebody doing, you're rooting for him to get away with it, right? Where in normal real life, you're not going to root for a bank robber or somebody get away with something, a crime. And so, it's just the power of perspective. Human nature, people remember things in the way they want to remember them. They kind of remember things, you guys, anybody in a relationship, you can come away from a conversation, you both remember it really different ways. So that's been a really interesting aspect of what I do. A lot of times in law, there are right and wrong answers, so it's pretty clear what it is. But more often than not, there are variations of gray, and you're arguing over the gray. I found that really fascinating. I thought you guys would enjoy a quick exercise. I don't want to take too much time on it, so we'll try and do it quickly. But would you mind passing these out?
Absolutely.
Just to give you an idea, a little example, a little flavor of something you might do in law school. So this is a famous case. So what I want you to do is I want you to read the first couple pages. Gives you a little factual scenario. Okay, this is over flag burning and the First Amendment, free speech. Okay, and we're going to kind of take a poll, and we're going to see what you guys think. Here's the task. You're going to read the facts. Whoops. Oops, sorry. Let me take this back. Yes, thank you. Okay. Hopefully I've got enough. Let's see, does everybody on the front have them? Okay, we're going to take a poll when we're done, but I want you to read those facts. I want you to read the arguments for the state of Texas. Quick summary, guy in a protest, he burns a flag. State of Texas has a law that says you can't burn flags. Question is whether or not that's constitutional. It goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. Arguments on both sides. So read the arguments, and then there's here on the second page, there's what we call precedents. And what that means is these are cases prior to this case that the Supreme Court has decided that will give you a little bit of guidance, okay? I'm not going to answer the question. You just got to decide how you apply those cases, okay? So let's take maybe 5 or 6 minutes just to read through that. Sure, yeah. Does anybody else need one? Okay. Well, we got this pocket over here. All right, let's talk about it for just a minute, okay? Everybody see the First Amendment there, right here on the first page? You got that. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, right? So is this speech? Is it protected by the First Amendment? So by show of hands, who would rule in favor of Texas? That is protected speech. You can burn the American flag. By show of hands. Got 2 or 3. Okay. Who would rule in favor of that you can burn the American flag? That's protected free speech. That was the position advocated by Texas, saying uphold our statute. It's constitutional. We can prohibit somebody from burning the flag. Okay. Sorry. So I'm going to rephrase that. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got y'all confused. Let's start this over. Okay. So for Texas, if you're saying I'm for Texas, you're saying I can prohibit you from burning the flag. It's not speech. It's conduct. That you have to draw a line somewhere. Texas. Who votes for Texas? Okay. Voting for Johnson, you're saying this is protected free speech. Strike down the statute, I can burn the flag. Who votes for Johnson? Right. Okay, so you can see the difficulty. I mean, it was almost an even split, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Almost an even split. You can see the difficulty sometimes in two sides of an argument, right? Obviously, a really important decision. This was a landmark decision back in 1989. But, a lot of times there aren't really clear-cut right or wrong answers in the law. And it's interesting and fascinating to discuss them. In law school, you'll take a case like that and you'll discuss it for a class. And you'll talk about how far is too far. The U.S. Supreme Court in this case said that speech, even though it's can be nonverbal, it's communication. What really the Constitution meant was expressions. And as long as you can make an expression by something other than your speech, as long as you're trying to convey a message and the other person can understand what you're trying to communicate. Okay. You can imagine on the far end of the spectrum, if I'm going to punch somebody, I'm obviously trying to convey a message, right? And they're going to understand what I'm trying to say, right? You have to draw the line somewhere. Burning draft cards, burning the flag. At what point, along that spectrum, do you say, okay, this stops being free speech and starts being somewhere else, something else? Difficult decisions. That's why the Supreme Court is who they are. They made an interesting decision in that one. They upheld or they ruled in favor of Johnson and said that was protected free speech. So anyway, but you can imagine all the different permutations and different factual scenarios. Burning flags, burning the draft cards, like the case you read about. There's a lot of different ways that could go. Anyway, I find the law interesting and fascinating, and that's in large part what I found so fascinating about law school. Turn to your third page if you would. This is more, I wish I were out there arguing cases before the Supreme Court. Rick was nice and said I'm accomplished, but I'm not that accomplished. I'm going to give you an example of a contract provision that I recently argued and had a court decide one way or another. In construction, so you have a general contractor who contracts with the owner, who's responsible for all the work. Then they'll, a lot of times, subcontract out work to subcontractors, do portions of the work. I represented one of the parties, and in that contract there was this provision. It's what we call a pay if paid clause. What a pay if paid clause can mean is it can mean I will only pay you for your work. Let's say I'm the general contractor and I hire a roofer. This contractual provision, you read it and tell me what you think it means, but the general contractor argued, this only means that I'm going to pay you if I get paid by the owner. Okay? The subcontractor read that provision and argued, it's not like a complete ban. I'm going to get paid at some point. It's just kind of timing-wise. If they don't pay you within a reasonable time, you still have to pay me. I'm not going to take the risk of you not getting paid by the owner. Okay, so read through that provision real quick. We'll take a vote. General contractor or subcontractor. So just take a quick read of that. So if you're ruling in favor of the general contractor, you're saying, owner didn't pay me, I don't have to pay you sub. If you're ruling in favor of the subcontractor, you're saying, what that provision really means is that you'll pay me when the general or the owner pays you, and if the owner doesn't pay you, you have to pay me within a reasonable time at some point. Okay, so who rules in favor of the general contractor? Don't have to pay. Okay, who rules in favor of the subcontractor? Okay, so it's interesting. I actually thought it'd be a little more slanted towards the general contractor. I represented the subcontractor in this case. And when you read that language, under no circumstances shall general contractor be obligated or required to advance or make payments to the sub until the funds have been advanced or paid by the owner or his representative to the general contractor. Sounds pretty good, right? What we did is we focused on the first word, when the owner or his representative pays. And then we also focused on the until the funds. So we argued to the court, I argued to the court, hey, this is a timing provision. This general contractor is trying to pay the subcontractor within the flow of a project, but my guy didn't say he was going to bankroll this project for this general and get caught up in whatever disputes this general and owner were having. He needs to pay him within a reasonable time, and the courts actually, went with that. So that's a kind of a real life example, but it's, it's interesting how, you really, can get into some of these issues and argue them. At least I find them interesting, so I hope you found them interesting. All right, let's talk about the pros and cons of being an attorney, at least from my perspective. And I'm going to be candid, I might be a little warped because if you read like the job satisfaction surveys and some of the different things that I'm talking about, that maybe I should have done back when I was in your position deciding whether to go to law school. I don't know if I would have gone to law school. And I hate to say that because statistically, especially young attorneys, young associate attorneys, one of the lowest job satisfaction ratings of all jobs out there. I find that surprising because I love what I do. I might perhaps be in the minority, so I'm probably the wrong one to speak on that. But anyway, in terms of cons, that's one. Statistically, people tend to have a lower job satisfaction. I don't know why that is. I don't get it. I think what I do is fascinating and interesting, but apparently that's an issue with what I do. It can be adversarial at times, especially in litigation. So you have to be a little bit competitive at least. I find that people who are overly competitive and complete jerks don't do very well for their clients, don't do well in front of juries. So you don't want to be a complete jerk, but you need to have a little bit of a competitive streak in you. Probably the bane of every attorney's existence is billing. In a private practice, that's the lifeblood of a practice. So I bill people just for my time. I sell my time, right? I sell my time in tenths of an hour, every 6 minutes. So I'll go through my day. If I've been at work from 9 to 6, take an hour off for lunch. I got 8 hours to count for. Of those 8 hours, I got to break them out for my clients. I spent 2.1 hours, 2.1 hours, 2 hours 6 minutes on the Jones case, and 0.3 hours or 18 minutes on the Smith case, etc. It's such a pain in the rear end, So I'm being busy videotaped, and my wife might see this, right? So it's such a pain in the rear end because you're constantly keeping track of your time. Okay. It's a little easier now that I'm working for myself because that's also my income. So it's a little easier, to give you an idea of what attorneys charge. I charge $250 an hour. So, every 0.1 is $25. Every 6 minutes is $25. So I've certainly got a financial incentive to track all of my time. On the flip side, it's a pain in the rear end to track your time like that to that level of detail every day. So that's really, I think, one of the things that attorneys really don't like, especially younger attorneys. Typical billing requirements for an associate attorney would be about 1,800 hours in a year. If you think about, yeah.
So
sure.
You got paid $250 an hour? About 25.
What's that? Oh, so I was saying I get paid $250 an hour. So every 0.1, every 6 minutes is $25. Yeah. Which also brings with it its own pressure, right? If somebody's paying you that much money, you need to be productive for them. You got to do a good job. You got to be careful about how you're spending their time.
They say talk fast.
Yes, they say talk fast. Yes. The reality is, there's interesting cases and there's interesting issues. Got the Texas v. Johnson and all these, different issues. But there's also some kind of mundane tasks that you do as an attorney. Everybody watches Law and Order and all the other shows on TV. The reality is, especially in a private practice, you're not in court every day. You're not arguing, all these big gotchas and chess matches with other attorneys every day. It does tend to be a lot of desk work, and it's not I'm not in the court all the time. If I did criminal law, I'd probably be in the court just about every day, but it's not the type of practice I have. So you do sometimes get tasks that can be a little bit mundane. For younger associates, it can tend to be longer hours. Yeah.
Would you call like the desk work a con?
No, I wouldn't call it. I like it. It's just maybe some people envision themselves when they're going into law. I'm going to be in front of a judge or a jury all the time arguing, and it's always going to be fast-paced. And it's not quite like that. Yeah, so it's not quite like that. Okay. Let's see. Maybe another issue to consider, and again, I want to encourage everybody to go to law because I love it. But the job market right now is a little tough. There's a lot of studies out there that talk about how, I'm thinking of cons again, especially if I were sitting in your situation, making sure I'm going in with eyes wide open. There have been even some recent lawsuits lately against law schools about potentially misleading students to get them to come to their school based on their job results. And and how many people really are getting jobs that really require a law degree, how much they're really being paid. It's really interesting. The job market's starting to come back for attorneys, but for a little while there, it was pretty bleak coming out of law school. And that's something definitely to consider. So those are kind of the cons that I'm thinking of. Let's see, pros. Like I said, I kind of touched on these already. Interesting work, you get chances to help people. One of the things I didn't expect is kind of the personal relationship you build with people. If you can imagine, you build relationships with people a lot of times that they're one of their most vulnerable times in their lives. they come in, they don't necessarily completely understand the law. They don't know what's going to happen. They're scared. I don't do divorce, but you can imagine somebody going through a divorce, somebody facing a crime, somebody coming to me who's being sued or suing, and their business is on the line. It's a real vulnerable point, and I've kind of cherished that aspect of it, because you build true, sincere relationships with these people, and you help them at a time when they really need help. So I've loved that aspect of it. Obviously, one of the decisions you make in going into a profession is, what does that profession, pay? That's, part of what you guys are all going through is you're deciding what to do coming out of college. Let's touch on that for just a minute. There's a good resource. There's the University of Utah. They do a class of 2013 summary report. So if I were in your situation now, thinking about going to law school, a couple things I consider is going and getting some data about what do attorneys really make. Read some job satisfaction. Try and get an internship at a law firm. Try and get some practical experience. But again, I'd maybe look at, realistically, what do attorneys make? Here in Salt Lake, what do attorneys make? I put together some statistics. Let me see if I can find that. Coming out of law school, the University of Utah, so this is the most recent information, but this is University of Utah 2013 grads. Of those that replied to the survey, most of them did. They got jobs, 70% got jobs that required a law degree. 19% got jobs that having a law degree was an advantage but not a necessity. Okay, so you had about 70% come out of law school practicing law, basically, and then another 30% who weren't. Salaries, for those starting salaries for those people, mean salary, again, this is across the whole range, right? From private practice to government to people who are clerking for judges. The average salary was median salary was $68,000. Okay, 25th percentile, $50,000. 75th percentile, $82,000. So just to give you, an idea, I also pulled some statistics. Let's see, let's make sure I got them, of people not just out of law school, but here in Salt Lake. Okay, and these are not just University of Utah grads, but just everybody across the board. Coming out attorneys with 0 to 3 years experience, median salary $78,000. Attorneys with 5 to 8 years experience, median salary $141. Attorneys with 10 plus years experience, $182. I'm giving you the median, right? It's right in the middle. No, just to give you an idea, but I would have done a little more research on, really, is this something I really want to do? How does the compensation, factor into that? So there are a lot of good sources out there. And I'd spend some time, if that's really what you want to do. And if I could go back and do it over again, if I were making that decision now, I'd go spend some more time really researching. Is this really what I want to do? What's involved? Talk to people who do it. I really didn't talk to a lot of attorneys and ask them about their opinions, good, bad, and the ugly. I wish it all worked out like I said, but it would have been better if I would have done that and taken the time to do that, making that big decision back when I was, sitting in your seats. All right, and that obviously applies to anything besides law.
In line with that, at the University of Utah, how many applied for the positions as freshmen and that were not accepted?
That's a good question. I think the University of Utah's acceptance rate is about 30 or 40. So it's in the 30s or 40s, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me tell you, and let me touch on that. Let me talk about, for those of you who are considering law school, just a couple quick 2 bits of advice, because I think that kind of touches right on that. Like I said, I kind of made fun of myself a little bit for getting out the U.S. News and World Report rankings and kind of figuring out why I want to go to a school that's in the top whatever, and I'm going to kind of look at that. If I had to do it over again, I'd probably focus more on cost and where I want to live. If I can't get into one of the top 10 or 20 schools in the nation, where you can go in and say, hey, I went to, Stanford, hire me, it's got a lot of prestige, I probably would instead, if I'm trying to decide between a school that's ranked 35th and a school that's ranked 62nd, I would rather focus on where do I want to live and go to a school in an area of the country where I want to live. And I'd focus on a school where I'm not going to come out of school just loaded and saddled with debt, which I think ties into what you guys are talking about as entrepreneurs. one of the reasons I obviously, besides just having to pay back the money, is when you've got a bunch of debt coming out of school, it restricts your choices. I had a lot of people who were very accomplished I went to law school with. University of Texas was a great school. I had people who had been practicing physicians, people who had worked at the Big Five accounting groups. I mean, real, accomplished people. And everybody had, it seemed like in my first year, a little bit of an ideal of what they wanted to do. I want to go work for low-income advocacy group. I want to go help this group. And as those debts piled up and tuition got really expensive and everything else like that, some of that changed for a lot of the people, because the reality was, by the time I come out of law school with $100,000 of student loan debt, I can't go work for the low-income advocacy group. They end up with a job at a big firm, slaving away, pumping out tons of hours and not really being satisfied because it's not really what they want to do. So, pay a lot of attention. If you're not going to be within that real top echelon, go somewhere that's affordable, that's going to give you some options coming out of school. Go there and do your best and do well. That's the real solution. Not trying to, I'm going to take whoever's the highest on the rankings list that's going to give me an offer. Okay. Again, and just natural in the normal life, where you go to school, you're going to be networking, meeting people. So go somewhere that you want to live. For example, in University of Utah, of their 150 some odd graduates, they had 13 go out of state somewhere else. So if I were an out-of-stater coming to University of Utah, man, I better plan on probably living in Utah if I'm going to come to the University of Utah, right? Vice versa, if you're going to go somewhere, chances are it's probably where you're at least going to start out working. So unless you're in one of those really top schools, so go somewhere, stay here, go somewhere nearby, go somewhere where you actually want to live. Not just, sometimes we seem like we get over-focused on those rankings. Yes. Benjamin.
One of my professors in my other class, he's an ex-attorney, so he decided to go back and be a professor at school because he found that being an attorney, everything that he did, he had to push the truth as far to the line as he possibly could in order to represent his client the way that the other attorneys were. So my question is that one reason you chose construction law over another form of litigation?
Perhaps. For example, I think it'd be hard personally, and I honor the people who do it because I think there's a real need for it, but it'd be really hard to do criminal law, right? Represent somebody who's guilty, or you think is guilty, and give them a real good defense. On the flip side, as you go through law school or you think about it, there are a lot of reasons why those people should get a defense even if they're guilty, but I'd have a hard time doing that. I have a little bit different way of practicing law. I kind of am really conservative in people I work with, and I don't stretch. If somebody wants to stretch too far, I tell them to find somebody else. And I think that served me well because I don't have to do a lot of tap dancing and explaining when I'm in front of a judge or a jury. We're telling our story, and it may be different from the other side, but there's a certain amount of credibility that goes into that. But I agree, that would be really hard, and I could see in certain areas of law that'd be real difficult. And I'm not saying it doesn't come up. Certainly there are clients who want you to push it, and then you just have to decide if you want to do that or not. But the easy decision is to say, I won't do that. Yeah.
So have you heard of latent construction and I guess they're getting sued by someone. Have you heard about that?
Oh man, I imagine, latent, like any big construction company, is always going to be involved in different lawsuits. It just seems inherent in construction.
Yeah, I think it's been 5 years going. He appealed, I guess they lost, but yeah, so I don't know. It's some huge thing.
Yeah, I haven't heard, specifics about that case, but it's construction projects seem like almost a problem waiting to happen sometimes. So there's always something coming up. Yeah, Ben.
How did you handle the non-law aspects of going into your private practice? I don't know how big it is, but setting up a facility. I don't know if you have any staff.
Yeah. So my firm now, we've grown. I started it 2 years ago. We've grown to 9 attorneys. We've got a handful of associates. I've got a couple of staff members. And that's kind of, I maybe didn't leave myself enough time. That's what I've loved about it, is I've kind of taken what I love to do and taken it an entrepreneur route. Again, with the idea of, hey, I can charge somebody $250 an hour. If I could figure out a way to get my overhead down without, having clients think, okay, this isn't as good because it's not in a downtown firm or big expensive high rise, I can keep that difference. That was kind of the intent of doing it. A little bit of a pain in the rear because you got to find space, you got to hire the right people, but it's been It's been so rewarding. You know, you guys are in this class for a reason, but I don't know if there's really anything more rewarding, at least from my perspective professionally, than doing your own thing. You know, if I want to work a few less hours one day, I do it. If I want to work more, I get the benefit of that. You know, managing people can be difficult sometimes, but you know, you just have to try and find the right people. It's been really rewarding. It was kind of difficult for about five or 6 months just to get everything in process and all the administrative sides, but now it's really smooth. Thanks for your question. Yeah, other questions, Matt?
So what is the name of your?
The name of my firm is Sage Law Partners. So there were 4 of us who were starting it. There was a guy named Hunter, Nord. We were going to be Hunter, Nord, Mayer, and Allen. And then Nate Wheatley wanted to come on board. We thought we were starting to get obnoxious if we were Hunter, Nord, Mayer, Allen, and Wheatley. And then, you know, what happens if Smith and Jones and Jex and everybody else want to come? So we just went with Sage Law, which is kind of a trend now in law firms, you know, as opposed to, I think the most I've ever seen in a law firm name is 8, but we didn't want to be those guys. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Mary.
How long did it take for your business to get smooth to where you could have those options to leave work early and adjust your schedule?
I was about 6 or 7 years out of law school when I really struck out on my own. I started this firm as kind of a variation of a former firm that I had joined where I was kind of doing my own thing.
The point of when you started your business to when you were able to do that, like not including school or anything like that, but just where you started school or not school, but where you started your business and how long it took your business to be smooth enough for you to adjust your schedule.
Oh, I see. Okay. That was really after I got past those first 6 months, so as of a couple years ago. And then when I was working in the other firm setting, I started as an associate, just working as an employee. And then I had a little bit of a bridge before I started my own, where I went over with a firm, but I was kind of my own person within a firm, where I did my own billing and I made my own money, but I paid them an overhead. So I'd say I was probably out of law school about 5 or 6 years before I kind of felt like I had complete control over my schedule and I could work more and make more, or work less and make less. Yeah.
As far as your scheduling goes now, how much time do you think you spend being a lawyer versus attending to running your company?
Let's say I have a 9-hour day minus an hour for lunch. I probably spend about an hour on administrative issues and the rest being a lawyer. And that ebbs and flows, of course. I have an office manager and I try and push as much over to my office manager as I can. So, but you know, if you averaged out all my time, it'd probably come out to 10-15%, give or take. Yeah.
Have you done pro bono work, and if so, why would you do that for someone?
That's one of the real things I've loved about being an attorney is sometimes there's just people who need help who can't afford it. And so I do that. I was on the phone with a lady earlier today, elderly lady, retired school teacher, had a roofer who came out and just butchered the roof job she did for her. And you know, and so I'm just helping her out. And you know, I have the choice to do that because of where I work. It's awesome. I love it. And you know, sometimes you have to be selective because there's so many people out there who need help. You know, another thing I do that's real rewarding is the bar will put on a legal clinic, and people can come to that for free, especially if they hit certain income levels. And you can go and you can give them advice. And usually it's along the lines of, I'm getting collected on by a credit card company, or my landlord's going to evict me. You know, just some different, simple, everyday common issues, especially for people who are having money problems. And you can help them out that way. And I've really enjoyed that. But you know, you do have to kind of pick and choose too, because you know, if you did everything, you know, that everybody needed who couldn't afford to pay for it, you'd be working for free the whole time. So you have to be a little bit selective because there's definitely a need out there. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you first started up your company, how did you set up your partnership? Was it limited liability or?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes. Last point, and I hope you all take this to heart. If nothing else that I said, even if you don't want to be an attorney, please, 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 when you all go and be entrepreneurs and you're going to start your companies, please set up an entity. The most flexible and easy right now is an LLC. But even if you go and just set something up, please, please, please set it up. In particular, if you have a partner, you know, I would encourage you actually to try and start a business without partners. Try and do it on your own because, you know, sometimes partners can be difficult. Or, you know, you have different needs in life, different expectations. One's working harder than the other. But if you do have a partner especially, please get an agreement in writing about how you're going to divvy up work responsibilities, make decisions, compensation, all those issues. But I set up an LLC, and it's, you know, a relatively easy process to do. All right, thank you, everybody.